Hi there, my name is Eric Heimlich. Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. This is the weekly podcast where I sit down at my farm office desk and just talk to you from my heart. And there's a few things that have been on my mind this past week that I wanted to share with you about. There was a lady that we pastored in Indianapolis for a number of years who passed away, and this past week I officiated her funeral. And Sue is a lady that I met at a homeless shelter in Indianapolis, and she was one of hundreds of lives that crossed our paths in the decades of ministry there at Victory Chapel on the Near East Side of Indianapolis, and the church that I helped to plant there. And the brokenness and abuse of her past had brought her to that shelter, but it was God who made her a part of our Victory family. And she gave a clear testimony, and I believe that I'll see her in heaven one day. But the pain and alienation had made her stubborn, and I'll use this word, prickly. She really had no one else involved in her life as far as family on a daily basis, and no other real friends. And so Victory became her family, and she was one of many that God brought into our lives, people that were alone, solitary, abandoned, and God brought them to us. I think of another lady that God brought to us. Heidi moved to Indianapolis, or rather I should say she showed up at the bus station downtown. I still don't know exactly why she picked Indianapolis or how in the world she ended up there, but she came from New York State and ended up downtown at the bus stop and didn't know anyone, had no place to go, and so finally the police brought her to the homeless shelter where our congregation was meeting there at North Rural on the east side of Indianapolis. And it was there that she became part of our family. And when she was finally able to get a place of her own, we would take her normally weekly to the store, to the bank, whenever she needed to go to the doctor. And of course, we would bring her to church as well. And she was one of the most faithful people and a integral part of our congregation. You know, as I was thinking back to some of those gatherings where Sue and Heidi would sit in our living room, and we would gather many times to share a pot of soup, and we would have conversations after that. We called it our team meeting, and it was really where the core of our congregation met. We had outreach to lots of people, but this team meeting time was really where we would practice the Lord's Supper, and where we had just a close-knit relationship. It's also a place where we practice church discipline. To be part of that, there was a standard that was set, and it wasn't the kind of standard that probably a lot of people set. Our list of rules was very, very small, and it basically came down to, are you endeavoring to walk in all the light that you have and to be in a relationship with Jesus? And the people that were part of that group were just a really intimate part of our lives. And both Sue and Heidi were part of that group. And after Heidi was diagnosed with dementia Alzheimer's, for the last few years of her life, I was appointed her guardian. And I was the only one there to care for her on that day when she passed away. Her husband was a veteran of World War II, and so she was buried in a national cemetery. And actually, it ended up that she was buried not far from where we now live here at Victory Acres. And I get to visit her grave occasionally and reflect on her life. While some may see the relationship with people like Sue and Heidi as kind of a one-way street, you know, it's all about us helping them, my experience was something quite different. While the problems and frustrations of really walking the road with them were real, and there were lots of times when Heidi would get upset at me for one reason or another, normally over trying to reason with her about something that I felt like she needed to do or take care of, and she would say, "Pastor Eric, just forget you ever knew me," and slam the car door. And then, 6 o'clock that evening, she would be out there in the lobby waiting for me to pick her up for church. And that was the relationship. Smiling, "Hi, Pastor Eric, how are you?" Completely oblivious to anything that had happened previously. They gave back in so many ways. they were a gift from God to us, and a constant reminder that people are made in His image and that they are more than just clients or statistical units of giving. There's a lot of different ways that we can kind of reduce people and dehumanize them if we're not careful. But I think people like Heidi and Sue are reminders that people are not just things to be used or objects to be valued based on their utilitarian way of what they can do for us, but they bear God's image and have intrinsic value because He made them. And in serving them, we are serving Him. And as much as we have done it unto the least of these, we've done it to Him. And in serving them, we demonstrate to the world that Christ is really present in His church. At that funeral, as Sue's sister came up to me afterward and said, I doubted that there would be anyone here today. Knowing her and knowing how difficult she could be, I just didn't think there would probably be anybody at her funeral. But thank you so much for loving her. The truth of it was that for the last few years, Sam and Rebecca Stratton and others in the Indianapolis faith community there carried the load since our family left Indy. But as the family gathered around the casket and shared, I was reminded once again truly that God sets the solitary in families, as Psalms chapter 68 verse 7 tells us. That it's God that places people in our lives, and it's God that causes the church, the body of Christ, the family of God, the household of faith, whatever term you want to use, to be a place where people who have no place, who have no people, where they can belong and where they can become a part. And it's just a real blessing. I was just taking time today to just reflect and be thankful. And the goal of my Friday mornings this year, as I've set my kind of rule of life and have a time on Friday for prayer and fasting and seeking God. But during this time today, as I was just reflecting and thinking, there's so much around us that could cause us to fear. But instead of fear today, I choose faith. Faith in God, who is Jehovah Jireh. He is more than enough, and He continues to provide, and He will provide. And I was just reflecting today on Isaiah chapters 24 and 25. The backdrop of cataclysmic destruction in chapter 24 ends with the banquet for all nations and God wiping away all tears and swallowing up death permanently. And I just thought, wow, no matter what problems I may be facing or could face, there is nothing that is worth getting worked up over in light of that picture. God wins. He wins. And all the details between here and there, we can make it. We'll get through it. We waited for God and He showed up. And so that passage just admonishes us, let's rejoice and celebrate His deliverance. Isaiah 25 verse 9. We should be people of celebration. We have something worth celebrating. And I was just reflecting on that song, Rejoice, the Lord is King. And the first words there of Isaiah 25, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you in praise. I will extol your fame. You have done extraordinary things. When I think back on my life, just in the last 10 years of what all God has done, it is hard for me to believe all the mountains that God has moved. And I think about all the different things that God has done and is doing. And truly, He is Jehovah Jireh. He is the God who provides. And so I just want to encourage you today. I don't know what you may be going through, but I want to encourage you to look around and see the people that God has placed in your path. Recognize that they are there for a reason. That God is the one who sets the solitary in families. God is the one who brings people into our lives, and treasuring them and holding them close. We don't know how long we have, but recognizing that they are special. Every single one of them is special. And then also just remembering that the end of the story has already been written. And the good news is God wins. And when we're on God's side, we win too. And that's the truth. And so I know there's a lot of things that are going on in the world that are just downright scary right now in terms of, are we going to be headed for World War III? Is there an economic collapse? The answer to all that is probably yes. And yet there is a God who is sovereign, who is in control, and we do not need to live in fear. We can live in faith. And so I just want to encourage you with that word today. God is working. He is Jehovah Jireh. He is more than enough.